spite of a warning voice comes in the night.
Quinn is at work in H-Town. Well, that's about to stop here in about 30 seconds, Quinn. So Galveston, Dallas, outstanding. All right. So we appreciate everybody being here tonight, and we have a great program for you. We are super excited that you're joining us here on our first foray into our webinar series at the Alumni Association. Well over 100 of you registered, and we really appreciate that. Many of you in the first half hour or so, or first hour that we had it on the streets. And I want to thank you all for doing that. A couple of housekeeping items before we get right to our show. If we could make sure, so that we don't have to do it, because we could, that you are all on mute. So if you make sure you're on mute, we'd appreciate it so we don't get any feedback. That would be the first thing. Two, if you want to, when we get Kevin started, you'll want to go to the top right corner of your screen and click on speaker view. That will put Kevin alone in your speaker. So you'll be able to see just Kevin, or in this case, if you just clicked it, you're just seeing me. So I apologize for that if you're just seeing me. We do expect your pets to walk through the screen. That's okay. We expect somebody to walk behind you. That's okay. As we like to say, that you never could tell what you're going to get on Zoom, but if everybody is on mute and you're using speaker view, that would be great. Also, if you'd like to ask questions as we go along, you can go to the bottom of your screen and just enter your question in the chat feature, and I'll be monitoring that while Kevin is talking, and we'll add your chat question to the curriculum while Kevin goes through. And we will have an open Q&A question at the end. So we'll have about 15 or 20 minutes at the end to do some Q&A with Kevin, and he'll give you his expertise in this area. A couple of things I want to remind you of. We have 2 more webinars in our series right now currently scheduled. There will be others. The next one will be on Tuesday, May 26th at 7 o'clock. And you can, in the chat, you'll be able to see the link to that. That is Surviving COVID-19, the Financial Impacts of Such. So we have 3 alums who will be talking to you about the financial impacts of COVID-19 on your retirement and investments. It won't nearly be as entertaining as tonight, but it'll be very important if you want to take the time to join that. That's already filling up as well. We're getting close to 100. And then, of course, we're all hoping sports is back. And by June 10th, when we have our 3rd webinar, Sports Talk, a whole new ballgame, we will have Matt Thomas from 790 here in Houston, Robert Flores from the MLB Network, and our old friend Bill Worrell from Rockets Basketball will be talking sports on June 10th. And you can sign up for all of those at the link you'll see in the chat. So that brings us to getting started right. A couple of things I really want to drop in on you really quickly. If you want to take photos tonight, if you'll please send your photos of you enjoying your wine or watching your webinar, you can send that to alumni@uh.edu. You can send that to alumni@uh.edu. And if you are a bit of a social media bug, you can always hashtag us at #TrueWillEverBe. That always goes to our pages. You can go to our Facebook page, which of course you can find very easily. So thank you all for being here. So now, enough about me. Now to introduce you to 1992 University of Houston graduate Kevin Simon. Currently teaches in the Conrad Hilton College of Hotel Restaurant Management. He also serves as the Director of Special Programs in the Fred Parks Wine and Outreach Programs. See, right off the bat, my dog's going to bark, and he hasn't even been in the house all day, so I apologize. Kevin is involved in the hospitality industry for over 40 years, spent many of those years working in the wine industry in sales, but also has helped develop, create, serve, and sustain wine in the wine and beverage program at the Hilton College for well over 2 decades. So without any further ado, I can see him on my screen. If you are on speaker view, you can virtually clap, and please welcome Kevin Simon to the screen to take you through Sip, Sip, Hooray. Kevin, it's all yours.
Hi, thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. I'm very honored to be here tonight. I'm really also honored to be kicking off this webinar series and this sort of new normal. Actually, I don't even think we're at the new normal yet, but I guess we're all doing the best we can. I hope you all are doing well and you're all healthy and safe at this point. So a good seminar to kick off, if I say so myself. Wine, I think we could all use a bit more wine these days. What I decided that I wanted to do was talk a little bit about, some of you may have, and I've seen some of you before in some of my wine seminars when I've done sort of a wine 101, and I decided to do something a little differently this evening to kind of walk you through how to taste and analyze wines. you ever see those experts, those master sommeliers and those wine experts who can just sort of, look at a wine and they can smell it and they can taste it, and then they'll tell you all about it. They'll tell you the grape, they'll tell you the country it's from, the region it's from, sometimes the vineyard, the vintage, the joke the vineyard manager told on the third day of harvest. Now, I exaggerate that a little bit, but for many years of being in the business, and I would watch people do this, and I just couldn't fathom how they did this. And then many years ago, I sat through a seminar through the Court of Master Sommelier, one of the more prestigious wine organizations in the world. And we went through a methodology of basically how to taste wine, sensory analysis. And I now know how these master sommeliers and how these experts do this. Now, I can't do it, by the way, not to their level, of course, okay? But it really is a fascinating methodology, and I think it really helps for those who are into wine. It really does help learn to appreciate wine. So with that said, now, Kendra, I'm not able to share my screen. Do you think you can help fix that? I was going to bring up my PowerPoint here, and it's not letting me. So if y'all, let's give it a minute or so, and let's see if they can fix that, because it's not allowing me to share my screen. There we go. All righty. Okay, I can't monitor, I can't affect this. All right, is there a way you can give me control over it? Okay, leave that up for now, and I guess we'll have you do that, and I'll sort of let you know when to go on to the next screen. So our objectives today, again, as mentioned, we're going to go through a wine tasting methodology and analysis. I'm going to take you through sort of this methodology that I speculate that most of you, not all of you, have not been through before. We're going to go through what I call the 5 S's of tasting wine, the 60-second wine tasting, and the sensory analysis, again, that methodology that the Court of Master Sommelier uses and teaches its master somms. So first of all, a little bit of a background on tasting wine. And this is one of the few original thoughts I've actually had in my life. And I'm going to share sort of a music analogy. My students who are joining us tonight, they may laugh because they hear a lot of this over my classes. I use a lot of music analogies because I think they fit, and I happen to be into music. So, and I sort of came up with this a long time ago. My kids were little. This was in the 90s. My kids were very young, and I remember I was at a concert and I'm listening to my music, and and I'm thinking how I'm listening to the music, okay, versus how kids might listen to music, okay. Let's take the song as an example. Mary Had a Little Lamb, okay. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb, right? That is the melody of the song, okay? Now imagine a symphony orchestra playing Mary Had a Little Lamb. It's no longer just the melody, okay? And let's assume just the whole orchestra is playing the song. What are you listening to? Are you listening to the strings? Well, that's one section of the orchestra. What strings are you listening to? Are you listening to the violin, viola, cello, bass, guitar? Are we listening to winds and horns? Are we listening to a clarinet, an oboe, a flute, a piccolo, a trombone, a trumpet, a saxophone? Sax, what's sax? Is it an alto sax? Is it a tenor sax? Okay, maybe we're listening to the percussion section. Okay, what are we listening to? We listen to the big, the timpanis, the snares, the bells. Okay, so wine is sort of the same way. I speculate for many of you to this point, when you taste wine, you're just tasting the melody. I'm going to try with today's sort of presentation is to try to get you to go past the melody, okay? Essentially, past the whole and into the sum of its parts, okay? The 3 sections in terms of wine that I want you to be thinking about, think of the acronym FEW, F-E-W, fruit, earth, wood. We're going to be coming back to that, okay? All right, so now let's go to the next slide, okay? And let's see, am I able to? Oh,
You
there
should
we go.
be. You should be able to now, Kevin.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you, Kendra. Okay, so, all right, so very cool. So these are the 5 S's of tasting wine. Okay, first we see the wine, and there are different things that we're looking at. We're looking at things like color and concentration, and rin variation. We're going to get into those details in just a moment. Something I want to share in terms of the color of wine. Generally speaking, white wines gain color with age. Red wines lose color with age. If you happen to have the wines that we recommended for tonight, whether it's the exact wines or just having a Pinot Noir and a Cab, you'll notice that the Cabernet is a darker color than the Pinot Noir. Okay, so you know, one might think the Pinot is maybe it's older because red wines lose color with age, but not necessarily. We'll get more into that in a little bit. Okay. After we see the wine, we swirl the wine. We've seen people doing this for years. Why do we do this? You know, 2 reasons really. One, we're allowing oxygen into the wine. At this point, oxygen is good for wine. Prior to opening up a bottle, oxygen is bad for wine. It will turn a wine bad. Okay, but once we open up the wine, we want to oxygenate the wine. For those of you who decant wine or have seen wine decanted, that's one of the reasons why we decant, is to bring oxygen in. Also, by swirling, what we're doing is we're volatilizing what's called the ethers and the esters. Essentially, we're releasing the aromas in the bouquet. Let me ask a question, and maybe Mike, you can answer in the chat. Maybe Mike, you could monitor this. What's the difference between aroma and bouquet? Who wants to take a shot at answering that?
Kirsten will type that question into the chat for us, and we'll see how everybody answers. The difference between aroma and bouquet. Go ahead, Seth, Kevin, continue through.
Anybody?
It says aroma is a smell, bouquet is several.
That is the answer. Okay, aroma is a single smell. Are we smelling cherry? Are we smelling you know, lemon, lime, whatever? That's a single smell. The bouquet is sort of the complex aromas. Think of it this way: a single flower, a single rose, a bouquet of flowers, a bouquet of roses. Okay, so that is the bouquet. After we swirl the wine, of course, we smell the wine. Now, I remember when I first started seeing people do this professionally, frankly, I thought it was rather disgusting. They would take their nose and just go right into the glass. I mean, you know, taking deep smells, right? You know, doing everything shy of snorting the wine. You don't want to snort the wine. That's not a good thing, okay? Right? But you want to take a deep smell. The reason why we put the nose into the glass, we do not want any extraneous type of smells coming in. I don't want to smell the perfume of my wife sitting next to me. I want to be able to smell just, you know, the wine. That's why we put our nose right into the wine. And by the way, when you're doing that, don't, you want to tilt the glass, okay? And put your nose into the glass while the glass is tilted, because the alcohol can sometimes overpower the other nuances. So by tilting the glass, the alcohol is going straight up, and we're getting more of the wine smells, if you will. And again, we're going to get a little...
Can I ask a quick question? Should everyone have the wine open and poured into a glass right about now? Should they go ahead and pour?
Okay, Mike, I'm having a little difficulty hearing you. And I think I'm on, my volume is all the way up.
So my question was, should everyone have a glass of wine opened in a glass right now?
Yes, I mean, if you have that, if you plan on tasting, yes, what I would do is I would have, and thank you, Mike, for mentioning that. One glass, I would put about just maybe an ounce or 2 of Pinot Noir. The other glass, an ounce or 2 of the Cabernet Sauvignon. I think that would be a good idea. Okay, and by the way, well, I'll get to this in a little bit when we actually start the sensory analysis. Okay, so after we smell the wine, we sip the wine. Okay, and this is also something that, you know, go back there, sorry. When I first, okay, and I'll show you how it's supposed to be done. Ooh, that was really nice. You know, making these really terrible noises by my dad, okay? But again, there is a reason behind that. What we're trying to do is we're taking the wine, one, we're bringing oxygen in. Once again, oxygen is a friend to wine at this point, bringing out many of the nuances. Also, we're spreading the wine all through the palate, allowing all of our mouth to be able to taste. And not, by the way, not just taste the wine, but also the texture, the feel of the wine as well. Okay, and then the final S is either swallow or spit. Generally speaking, when I'm in a wine tasting, I'm almost always spitting, and my students will attest to that. Tonight I'm not, it's only 2 wines, I think I can handle it. But an example, if you ever go to a big wine tasting, and I hope we get to see one of those in the near future, where you go in to say a grand tasting, like at the Sugar Land Wine and Food Affair, where you walk in and there's hundreds of wines to taste. If you took 1 sip of each one of those wines and swallowed it, they would peel you off the carpet at the end of the night. All right, so you learn, and when you go into those environments, you will see a very minority of people who are actually spitting the wine. Those are the professionals, okay? When we go into situations like that, we go around the room, we have a systematic way of tasting. We taste, we spit, we taste, we spit, we taste, we spit. And then after the business, if you will, okay, is done, it's like, okay, now I'm gonna go and drink. By the way, some of you are going to laugh at this, but there's a difference between tasting wine and drinking wine, okay? Drinking wine is fun. Tasting wine is work, okay? And I know many of you were laughing at that, but if you're in the business, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so we're going to now take these 5 S's and break them down even further, okay? Again, you should have wine in your glass, okay? Ideally, you want to have an incandescent or an LED light above you if you can, okay? And ideally, you want a white background, okay, against, again, the backdrop of the wine. That will actually maximize our visual, if you will, when we're appreciating wine, okay? Okay, so this is the sensory analysis as taught by the Court of Master Sommelier. As I mentioned earlier, the Court of Master Sommelier is arguably one of the most prestigious wine organizations in the world. It's a British-based organization. That's the organization. You've heard of Master Sommeliers. Some of you may have seen the movie Somm, which I believe is on Netflix, and there's several sommelier movies now. And it is the Court of Master Sommelier that eventually awards that highest level of Master Sommelier. And this is the methodology that I was taught many years ago, and they still teach today on really how to really learn and appreciate wine, okay? So we're gonna break it down into several components. The first component is the visual aspect of wine. And what I find fascinating about this is that all of this is giving us information about the wine. As a professional, it's allowing you to understand, but even as a non-professional, even just as a guest and someone who wants to enjoy wine, this is going to allow you to appreciate that much more, okay? So in the visual, okay, the first, we look at what's called brightness, okay? And there are several levels of brightness. So what you want to do is you want to take the wine, ideally with your light above it. You're looking at the surface of the wine. You're looking at the surface, and is the wine reflecting the light well, or is the wine absorbing the light? Now, if this is the first time you're doing this, you don't really have a benchmark. It gets easier the more you do it. But again, you're looking down on the wine physically, okay, not figuratively. It's a nice wine, okay? But physically, you're looking down on the wine and the surface of the wine and how basically it's handling the light. There are different levels of brightness. We have the highest level would be called star bright. The next level down would be day bright, then bright, and then dull. All right, now I'm looking at this Pinot Noir, and again, just from my experience at doing this, this to me is probably bright at best, okay? Now, what does that tell us? One of the final processes of making wine, after fermenting and making wine, is a process called collage or fining. It's a process, it's sort of like filtering, okay? So it helps clear the wine, but it's a little different. Collage or fining is where we add a colloidal matter to the wine, such as gelatin or egg whites, okay? And it sifts through the wine, and what it does, it helps clear it. It helps the wine essentially look prettier, look brighter, look prettier. Many winemakers choose to bypass this or not fine all of the wine. Maybe they'll only find part of it, because what they believe, it can take some of the nuances of the wine, some of that complexity away from the wine. Usually this is done on better quality wines, usually not your low-end wines. Most of the lower-end wines, you know, would be star bright. They've been filtered and fined, okay? And I'm not saying that if it's filtered and fined, it's not a quality wine. I've seen very high quality wines that are also filtered and fined. But again, it's just giving us information about the wine. After the brightness, there's the next thing we look at is what's called clarity, okay? How clear is the wine? Is it clear? Is it cloudy? Is there sediment in the wine? Oftentimes, the clarity and brightness are very much related to each other. So if you have a wine that is dull or bright, chances are the clarity is, and oftentimes we can go, you know, low, moderate, or high. I'm looking at, again, just this Pinot right now, and I would put the clarity really as sort of, you know, maybe moderate minus, okay? It's not very clear. So once again, confirming to me that this wine has not been filtered and fined, okay? We then look at the color of the wine, okay? As I mentioned earlier, red wines lose color with age, white wines gain color with age. But color can tell us a little bit more as well. If we can look at both of these wines right now, clearly the Cabernet Sauvignon, the Cab is definitely a darker color than the Pinot Noir, okay? One of the things we learn about different wines, different grape varieties, okay? Cabernet Sauvignon has a very thick skin. So oftentimes Cabs can be very dark in color. All of the color and a large part of the tannin is coming out of the skin of the grape, okay? Pinot Noir, on the other hand, excuse me, is a very thin skin grape. In fact, there are techniques that are used to make Pinot Noir that are not needed to make Cabernet, to help bring out, to help extract the color and tannins out of the Pinot Noir grape, because that skin is so thin, okay? So by looking at the wines, we learn different grape varietals and what colors of, not just in this case Pinot Noir and Cabernet, but Syrah and Sangiovese and Malbec and all the other grape varietals and what they should look like. So just by looking at the wine, you know, again, it's telling us, it's giving us information, once again, allowing us to appreciate it a little bit more. Next step is something called concentration, okay? Now, don't do this yet. Please watch me first, okay? What you want to do is you want to turn the glass onto its side, okay? And whether you hold it in front of you or sideways, vertical or horizontal, that's really up to you. And the way I like to show this, imagine this is a swimming pool, okay? And what you want to do is look at the color in the middle of the pool and follow the color all the way out to the rim. Okay, the longer it holds that same color, the more concentrated the wine. In this case, the Pinot holds it, I'm seeing about from the center, it's holding that same color about halfway, then it starts to lighten up a little bit. So I would put the concentration on this as sort of moderate plus, okay? The next step is called rim variation, okay? Now, again, while holding the wine on the side, look at the outer rim. Look at the color of the outer rim of the wine, okay? Imagine this is the planet Saturn, right? And we're looking at the rings around Saturn and the outer ring, okay? What color is that outer rim, if you will? A red wine, when it's very young, okay, that rim is gonna be sort of purple and pink and maybe rosy, okay? As it gains age, it will turn more ruby, it will then turn more garnet, okay, and then sort of orange and brown, all right? And that tells us the age of the wine. Generally speaking, when we look at the rim variation of a wine, we rank it in several categories. Is it 1 to 3 years old, 3 to 5 years old, or when I learned this methodology, they went 5 to 7 years old and then over 7. Now I believe they sort of dropped the over 5 to 7. It's either 1 to 3, 3 to 5, or over 5 years. So that's telling something about the age. Now, when I'm looking at this Pinot, okay, I'm seeing, oh, it's interesting. I'm seeing a little bit of sort of pinkish in mine. And by the way, just, I'm not sure if you have, this is the Bella Glace Pinot Noir. It's from Clark and Telephone Vineyard. It's a Santa Barbara Pinot, and it's a 2017 vintage, okay? So while I am seeing a little bit of maybe pink, but it's also turning more ruby. So if I were doing this blindly, if I didn't know what these wines were and I'm looking at this wine, I would be vacillating between 1 to 3 and 3 to 5. And as we can see, it is actually 1 to 3. This probably September, it turns 3 years old. Okay, so we're right about at that 3-year mark. Okay, so that's what the rim variation tells us. And then the final part of the visual is called viscosity. Okay, many of you have referred to this as the legs of the wine. Now, the legs of the wine, when you swirl the wine, if you haven't done it yet, you have to swirl twice. You need to swirl once just to let the wine coat the glass. We then swirl a second time, and then we look at those lines that form and that drip down the glass, okay? Generally speaking, this is called the leg. The wider the leg, and when the leg begins to form, right at the bottom of it is what's called a tier. So the larger the tier, the wider the leg. What that tells us is how much alcohol and or sugar is in the wine. I've heard so many things over the years what the legs tell us. They really don't tell a whole lot other than, again, the alcohol and the and/or sugar content of the wine. And what happens after you do this for a while and you get sort of a benchmark, and it changes in glasses, by the way. It tells you, the alcohol. So if you're trying to guess what the wine is, there are some wines that have more alcohol. There are some wines that have less alcohol. Okay. I'm speculating on this particular wine. I'm thinking around 14% is what I'm thinking. Let's see what it says here on the, okay, give me a second. It's got to be here. By law, it's got to be here, and I can't find it. All right. 14.6, okay? All right, so that's, for wine, that's pretty high in alcohol for wine. Generally speaking, by the way, New World wines like, say, from California, United States in general, tend to have more alcohol than, say, the European wines, French wines and German and Italian and so on. And that's generally because we have warmer temperatures here, which creates more sugar at harvest, which creates the more alcohol in the wine. So that is the visual of the wine. So think about it for a moment. We haven't even smelled or tasted this wine, and all this information we can now ascertain from the wine just by looking at it, just by going through this visual methodology. Again, this is what the master sommeliers and the experts use when they're blind tasting and when they're trying to figure out what wine is. Okay. Let's go on now. The next stage is the nose of the wine. Okay. Basically, we're going, and smelling the wine. Now, the first thing we want to do when we smell the wine, we don't swirl. Okay. We want to smell the wine, okay, without swirling to see if there's any flaws in the wine. Okay. And because what happens if you swirl, if there are subtle flaws, like a wine being corked, like if there's too much sulfur, or let's say oxygen invaded the wine and it turned it bad, okay? If there's only a slight flaw and you swirl it, by volatilizing those ethers and esters, those nuances are going to essentially overpower that flaw. So the first time when you smell a wine, as an example, you go to a restaurant, you order a bottle of wine, they pour a little bit of the wine for you to taste, okay? Don't swirl it, okay? The first thing you should do is just take it and smell it and to see, is there any off odors? And for those who have some wine experience, there are many different flaws. And one of the most fascinating seminars I'd ever sat through many years ago, and I've sat through a couple of these, is actually a flaws seminar where you learn the various flaws that can happen in wine and how to identify them. But in smelling my wines, I'm not smelling any flaws. So one of the more common ones I do want to share, and we probably, many of us have had this, where a wine is corked. What happens is a bacteria invades the wine. The bacteria specifically is TCA, the formal, I think, chemical name, it's 2,4,6-trichloroanisole. And what it does, it basically can turn the wine bad. It can't hurt you, by the way. Okay, none of these flaws can really hurt you, but it just takes away from the wine. It'll take away the fruit. It'll take away the flavor. A corked wine can taste very, very stale and musty, almost like wet cardboard or going into an old bookstore. And really badly corked wine can smell like dirty sweat socks after, a extra inning baseball game. Okay. So, again, it can't hurt you, but it obviously takes away from the enjoyment of that wine. Now, the rest of these, I'll sort of let you read on your own. When I was taught this, we went through each one in order, but I don't like doing that. The way I prefer is to sort of take the wine, swirl it, okay, put your nose, give a good smell, and then think of what I talked about earlier, fruit, earth, wood, the sections of the orchestra, okay? And what do you smell first, okay? And I'm going to ask that. Take the Pinot Noir, and I know we may not all have the same Pinot, okay, but take the Pinot Noir, smell it, and what are you guys getting first? What's the first thing that hits you? Think of fruit, earth, wood, okay? And then just kind of put it in the chat, and Mike or someone can let me know what some of you are saying.
We're watching. See what everybody's saying. Continue on, and we'll put that in there, Kevin.
Okay, cool. So what I got first on mine is fruit, okay? That hit me, and frankly, I got all three, but fruit is what struck me first, okay? Then you sort of break down that fruit. What kind of fruit is it? Is it citrus fruit? No, I'm not getting citrus fruit on this. Is it more tree fruit? Maybe berry fruit? I'm getting more of the berry fruits in this wine. In fact, I'll speculate that's the type of fruit we're going to get on both these wines this evening, okay? All right, so we get fruit, berry. Well, what type of berry? I'm getting on this, I'm getting a little bit of strawberry, raspberry. I'm picking up on some plum. And I'm getting some cherry. And even cherry, am I getting a dark cherry? Am I getting more of a lighter cherry? Okay, so again, these are just, some of those, what we talked earlier, those individual aromas that we're trying to pick out, if you will. Okay, so that was the fruit category. Let's go to the earth category. I'm getting a little bit, not a whole lot. Generally speaking, New World wines, when we talk about the New World, we're speaking of countries that we've only been making wine for maybe a few hundred years, like the United States, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Chile, Argentina, as an example. Generally speaking, New World wines are going to tend to be more fruit forward, meaning the fruit is what you're going to get initially, okay? And the earthiness, if you will, that's going to tend to be secondary aromas and flavors, if you will, okay? When we go to some of the old world countries like France and Italy and Spain, that usually reverses. Oftentimes it's those earthy nuances we get first, and then the fruit is sort of more subtle and in the back, okay? But I am getting a little bit of earth on here, maybe a little bit of mushroom, a little bit of sort of wet soil, if you will, okay? Let's go to that third category, if you will, wood, okay? All right, and the wood, wines, some wines age in wood. Contrary to what many people think, most wines are not fermented in wooden barrels. There are some that are, but by and large, most wines are fermented in stainless steel tanks. Many are going back to what was used, many years ago, and concrete tanks, if you will. It gives it a more cleaner, I guess, taste, if you will, when you're making wine that way. But if you want the wood nuances, and wood can impart, by taking wine and aging it in barrels, wooden barrels, after it's been made, you're adding nuances of smoke, butterscotch, vanilla, coconut, as an example. So when I smell this Pinot, I'm definitely picking up on vanilla, okay, which tells me, and by the way, that tells me there's more French oak in here. There may be some American oak, but I speculate this was fermented in French oak because I'm picking up more of that vanilla. Generally speaking, and this really is a big generalization, American oak will give you more sort of, smoke and dill nuances, whereas French oak will give you more of that sort of butter, butterscotch, caramel, vanilla type nuances, okay? Okay, so once again, we haven't really tasted, right? And we think about everything we now know from the wine just by looking at it and just by smelling it, okay? All right, now we're gonna get to the taste. Now, something that I wanna share This, by the way, what I'm about to share does not come from the Quartermaster Sommelier. I got this from someone else, and I'll give him the credit, Kevin Zraly. He was the sommelier on Windows on the World. That was the restaurant on top of the World Trade Center, before September 11th. And I'd met Kevin and sat in one of his seminars, and he shared this, and I liked it a lot. And he called it a 60-second tasting. Okay. Now think about this for a moment. Most of the time, we eat something, we drink something, and almost as soon as we put it in our mouth, we say, oh, I like that, or oh, I don't like it. When it comes to wine, I'm going to challenge you not to do that. What we want to do is we want to get it in our mouth, okay? And we're all going to do this together in just a moment, okay? When on 3, I'm going to ask us to all sort of smell and sip the wine, okay? We're then going to either spit or swallow, okay? And then we're going to do a 60-second tasting, okay? And actually, let me get to that next slide, okay?
Kevin, you
get to that 60-second tasting, all right? And we're going to break that down into 4 parts: 0 to 15 seconds, 15 to 30, 30 to 45, and 45 plus. And we're going to watch how the wine changes in the mouth, okay? So first, before we even start this, I want everyone just to take a sip of the wine and not think about it, okay? If you haven't done so yet, just take a sip of your wine. Don't think about it. What you're doing right now is you're sort of neutralizing your palate. Whatever was in your mouth up to this point, we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to sort of neutralize it with the wine we're about to taste. So everyone just take a sip of their wine.
Kevin, I think you can hear me at this point. You wanted me to keep you on time, so I'm giving you your 10-minute warning.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, so, all right, so now we did our neutralizing taste. Now we're all going to do this together. Right now, by the way, one last thing: when you taste wine, okay, you get it in your mouth, you're inhaling, you're sipping like I showed you earlier. After you swallow or spit, you want to exhale through your nose, okay? And what you're doing there is you're maximizing the flavor profile of the wine, okay? So we're all going to do this together. When I say on 3, we're gonna smell, we're going to sip, we're going to leave it in our mouth for at least 3 seconds. We then swallow or spit, exhale through your nose, and we'll do the 60-second tasting together. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
How much fun is Alyssa Foley's team having, by the way? That's what I want to know. Look at them. It's like 7 of them over there. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so right away, the fruit hit me. Okay, right away I got that fruit. We're in the first 15 seconds here. We're about 5 to 7 seconds in. Feel your mouth salivating. This is the Pinot. I hope you tasted the Pinot. All right, that's the acidity that's in this wine. It's increasing a little bit, okay? All right, we're in the 15 to 30 second range now, okay? Usually right about the, now I'm getting more of the fruit. I'm getting some of that vanilla. I didn't mention this earlier because I'm not very good with it, but I'm getting a lot of good floral nuances right now. All right, we're right about 30 seconds here. Right now, it's all coming into balance. Nothing is overpowering anything else right now, okay? We're in the 30 to 45 second range here, okay? We still have it in the mouth. I still have some of that acidity. I'm getting, again, to me, very good fruit, very good red fruit, along with that nice sort of crisp balance. By the way, crisp is a more, a better marketing term to say rather than acid, okay? So when you hear the term crisp, that's what people are talking about, the acidity that's in the wine. We're in the 45 second plus range here. This is what's called the finish of the wine. What is left in our mouth after the wine is gone. The finish here is moderate. I have a nice, sort of somewhat crisp, lightly crisp, but a good, fruity, light fruity finish with this particular wine. And by the way, for what it's worth, Pinot Noir happens to be one of my favorite grape varietals. So, and then again, one of the things, you can talk about the sweetness. This wine has very little residual sugar. The body, we talk about the body of the wine. That's the mouth feel, okay? How light or heavy is it in the mouth? Is it, light-bodied, medium-bodied, full-bodied? What we mean by that, or an analogy I'll give you, think of skim milk, whole milk, heavy cream. Think of how that would feel in the mouth, the texture, if you will, the lightness or the heaviness. That's the body. Okay, wood, we already noticed the wood, the fruit, the vinosity. We got the flowers, spices, herbs. There was some spice action going on here. I got a little bit of white pepper. I got a little bit of green herbs. Botrytis is an actual mold that we see sometimes in dessert wines. We already talked about the acidity. balance, that have beautiful balance, you know. And I'll say this about balanced wines. Not all, how do I say it? Not all balanced wines are great, but all great wines are well balanced, okay? And then when we talk about the length or the complexity, that's how long, okay, did it stay in the mouth? That's what we talked about, you know, with the finish. And complexity, and what we mean by complexity, was there a lot going on, or was there a little going on? I would argue with this Pinot Noir, there was a lot going on, okay? And it's one of those wines that each time you taste it, I think, especially this Pinot, you're gonna get something else out of the wine, almost like a great song, a great movie. The more you listen to that song, right, you'll pick up things you didn't hear before. Same thing with a movie. You watch a movie more than once, twice, three times, four times, many times, you'll pick things out that you didn't get the first time. And I think you're gonna get that with the Pinot Noir, okay? Now, let's, my time is limited. I'm gonna go back, okay? We'll just kind of keep this up. Let's go with the Cabernet, okay? And I'll go through this pretty quickly, okay? Looking on the visual, and this is actually how they do it, okay? Brightness is dull, okay? I mean, so, and the clarity is definitely very low. This wine is absolutely not been filtered and fine, okay? It is a deep, dark ruby color. Concentration, looking at the pool here, it's a fairly maybe high minus on the concentration, okay? Rim variation, it's also, I happen to know it's a 2017. Again, it's right on the border of that 1 to 3, 3 to 5 year wine, okay? And I got to swirl twice, okay? See, the first time I'm not getting any legs. So I swirl the second time, I wait for the legs, and I don't know if you can see it on mine, but you look at the lines that go down on the side of the glass. I'm also gonna, oh, this is bigger than, I'm gonna say, also I'm gonna go about 14.5 on this. Let's see what it says, okay? All right, and oh, they put it in obscure places sometimes. 14 exactly according to the bottle, okay? All right, so we go on to the nose of the wine. Okay, let me put all this up, okay? No obvious flaws. Yeah, boy, we got some power on this without a doubt. Okay, once again, I got, in terms of fruit and wood, those both hit me simultaneously. In terms of the fruit, a little bit different, where I got a little lighter red fruits on the Pinot. Here, I'm getting darker red fruits. I'm getting almost like a dark plum, dark cherry, blackberry, almost, and it's interesting. This is how you can almost tell the difference sometimes between Sonoma and Napa. This is a Sonoma Cab. It's from the Alexander Valley, okay? And I'm picking up on a little bit of blueberry. You won't get that in Napa Valley wines. That somehow comes more from the Sonoma wines. Please don't ask me why, because I don't know. I just know that. And obviously that's something to do with the terroir, the soil, the weather, you know, conditions that are in Sonoma, okay? Also picking up on sort of that mushroom and wet soil. And interestingly, in my opinion, this wine is not as complex as the Pinot. While I do smell a bunch of stuff going on, I smell more in the Pinot than I do in this, okay? Going on, again, to the tasting. Again, by the way, there were no obvious flaws. I mentioned that earlier. Let's go ahead. Let's all do this. Well, actually, let's all take a sip, okay? Put it, you know, just take a sip, swallow or spit. Don't think about it. Let's get rid of the Pinot that's in our mouth, and let's coat our mouth with the Cab. And again, when I say try not to think about it, it's like if I tell you, don't think of a pink elephant. I don't want anybody thinking of a pink elephant right now. The last thing I want you to do is think of a pink elephant. Everyone's thinking of a pink elephant, right? So, but again, you try not to think about it. Okay, now we're ready for our 60-second tasting. So again, on 3, let's get it into the mouth, sip on it for 3 seconds, swallow, exhale through your nose, and we'll do our 60-second tasting. 1, 2, 3.
While we're doing that, folks, you can put some, I have a few questions in the chat, but if you have a few more questions towards the end, we're coming down the home stretch here for Kevin.
All right, so right away, tannin. You feel your mouth sort of dried up a little bit, a coating on your teeth, on your gums. You almost want to brush your teeth. That is called tannin. And that is coming mostly from the skin of the grape. Remember, Cabernet Sauvignon has a much thicker skin than Pinot. It's also coming from the wood. right after the tannin. For some of you, you may not be able to get past that tannin. Okay, it really, it just coats the mouth and it's hard to get past. Right, but beyond it, again, good. The dark fruit, the wood on here. I think I'm getting more American oak on this. I think we may have both. I think we may have American and French, but I'm getting more of that smoke and a little bit of dill. So I don't know if the bottle says it. No, it doesn't. But I'm getting more of that American oak on here. A little bit of that earthiness. You know, and I was sort of talking, so I got past that 30-second balance, but right at 30 seconds, it just balanced nicely. We're in well past the finish here. It's still in the mouth. I mean, it's still there. It's to me, a very long, lengthy finish. By the way, those tannins, this is great. It's a great food wine, especially something with fat, okay? That's why they say Cabernet Sauvignon in a steak, a cab and a slab, okay? Because, and what's wonderful about wine, one of the wonderful things about wine is that, you know, it makes the food taste better, but the food also makes the wine taste better. And when you have a cab and a slab, Mike, I saw you laugh on that. By the way, if any of you know Guy Stout, I got it from him. I got to give him credit, okay? But the reason why Cabernet goes so well with steak is that steak can be very fatty, right? Especially if you're having a ribeye or, you know, New York strip, right? And the tannin in the wine will immediately work on those fat molecules in the steak, will break down that fat and will bring out the flavor of the steak. What many people don't speak about as well, you may not have liked this wine because of those tannins. I know my wife, I've been trying, we're married 33 plus years now, and she still has difficulty with Cabernet, and I try to force her, you know. And I think for many people, you almost have to have food to appreciate a Cabernet, because the fat that's in the steak, if you have that in your mouth and then you took a sip of this wine, you would not feel the tannin anywhere near as high as you're feeling it right now, because the fat breaks down those tannin molecules and brings out all the other nuances of the wine. So that's why when you have an ideal wine and food combination, truly it's one of my favorite things in life. The wine makes the food taste better, the food makes the wine taste better. Enjoyment in life as we can.
All right, so Kevin, we are at the end of our spot. I know you have one more slide you want to put up there about the Hilton College before we get to our Q&A. So while you're finding that slide,
okay, if I may,
will ask a few.
If you guys, again, I thank you very much for taking time out of your schedules to be with us tonight and for participating tonight. If you like this presentation, if you'd like to help out the students at the Hilton College and give to UH, you know, please do. This is the website. It's actually the UH website. When you go there, you'll see there's a box for colleges and programs. Please consider going to the Hilton College. When you go there, there are several designations where you can choose where you want your donation to go to. So again, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for listening to me, and I'll take whatever.
Kevin, we have a couple of questions here. How do they determine the alcohol percentage in wine? What makes that determination?
The amount of sugar that's in the grape at harvest will determine the amount of alcohol in the wine. Generally speaking, when we're making wines such as these, when we're making a drier style wine, generally speaking, whatever the sugar content, and that is measured in the grapes by something called Brix, right? About 60%, once we convert that sugar into alcohol, about 60% of that will be the alcohol content. So most wines, when we're making dry wines, the Brix is going to be between maybe 21 and 25 Brix, okay? And then about 60% of that will end up being the alcohol percentage. Great.
The next question is for all of our Cajun fans that are paying attention today, and we appreciate you being out there. What wine would you recommend to go with spicy food?
Okay, now I have an answer that many of you are not going to like, but whatever you want, okay, and I mean that. There's, you know, one of the things I've tried my entire wine life, if you will, which has been over 40 years now, you know, is not to be pretentious about wine, not to be snobbish about wine. You eat what you want and you drink what you want with it, and you don't give a hoot what anybody else thinks or says, okay? Now, some chefs will argue with me on this next statement, but to me, there is no such thing as a bad wine match, bad wine and food match. There are just better matches, okay? Excuse me. For getting to the specific question, Cajun food, I often like a crisp white wine to go. If I'm having, say, crawfish etouffee, one of my favorite, New Orleans style foods. I like doing something that's a little crisp and maybe a little sweet as well. Maybe a Riesling. Sometimes I'll go with a Sauvignon Blanc. There's a wonderful wine from Austria called Gruner Veltliner. To me, those are all very, very nice wines that compare with at least the seafood side of your Cajun. With spicy foods, you don't want tannin, okay? Tannin will accentuate that spice and they just don't go together. So let's say you're doing a Cajun type steak that's spicy. You don't want a Cabernet. You're better off going with something like a Pinot Noir, which has less tannin, excuse me, and more acidity that will cut through that spice.
While you're getting rid of that little cough, I will ask you a double-sided question. How long is wine good for once it's been open? And how long is wine good for if it's never been open? Typically.
There are two words you can use to answer any wine question. And those two words are, I saw some of my former students here today, they know what it is. It depends, okay? In terms of once it's open, well, once you open a bottle of wine, what's the best way to deal with it? Drink it, okay? But if you're going to store it, there are different types of preservation methods out there, Cruvenet systems. Now they got some fancy ones where you actually never take the cork out of the bottle. You actually put a needle in. It puts in an inert gas while it pumps out the wine. That's a great way. But if you're just you don't have any of that, you open a wine, put a cork in the bottle, and then even a red wine, put it in the refrigerator. I know many people think I'm crazy for saying that, but the cold temperature in the refrigerator will help sort of preserve the maturation. Generally speaking, once a bottle of wine is open, excuse me, I got that little tickle there. You have maybe 2-3 days, okay? If you put it in the refrigerator, you can extend that a little bit. Now you don't want to drink a red wine refrigerator temperature, okay? So the only detriment there is that you have to take it out and probably let it sit a good 20 to 30 minutes to get up to the ideal temperature to drink a red wine, which is around 65 degrees. In terms of if it's never open, that really does depend. Many people think there's a misnomer. Take wine, age it, it's going to get better. That is absolutely false, okay? 90% of all wine made in the world should be consumed within the first probably 1 to 3 years. Excuse me. It's at its best the moment it's made and it's not getting any better. 5 years, maybe it gets a little bit better, but again, 95% of all wine made in the world, should be consumed almost immediately. There's a very small percentage of wine, maybe 3 to 5% of wine that's made in the world that can age. In many cases, it's made to age. You do not want to drink it when it's young. Some of these wines will not hit its peak maturity until maybe 15, 20, 25 years after the vintage. But again, it depends. And I'm not saying that as a joke, because when you age a wine, you're gaining certain things, but you're also losing certain things, okay? You lose some of the fruit with the age, but then you're gaining other nuances. So it really depends on the wine itself. What I would recommend is you have to look up that wine, and most wines these days, you can just, look up, you can go to their website, and oftentimes you can find out from them what is the ideal drinking period for that particular wine and that particular vintage.
Excellent. So the last question inside of our 1 hour time limit, and I will tell you folks that Kevin has agreed to stay an extra 15 minutes. If you have more questions, you have to go at 8, great. But if you want to stay for an extra 15 minutes, we will stay. We want to make, this has been really, really fun. Somebody asked, and I love this question too, is there a book or article out there you would recommend to learn more about wine, tasting, and pairings? Do you have a special publication that people that we could also put in the chat?
favorite books, and this is more for beginners, okay? And I mentioned Kevin Zraly earlier. He's an author, and he has a book called Windows on the World, A Complete Wine Course. I really like that book when friends and colleagues and, you know, they not taking a class, but they just want to learn about wine. Many wine books out there, you almost have to have wine knowledge to understand some of those books. Kevin Zraly does a great job of talking about the basics, and a beginner who knows nothing about wine can open that book, read it, understand it, and learn to appreciate wine. So that's one of my favorite books. Another comment I'll make is to find a critic, an author that you like. There are many out there, you know, Karen McNeil, you know, Alexis Lachine, Robert Parker, Hugh Johnson. There are many. James Lobb is one of my favorites because he works for the Wine Spectator. And what I find, there are critics out there that you want to find that has a similar taste to yours. Robert Parker is considered a god of wine, and no disrespect, Mr. Parker, if you happen to see this at some point, but I find that your tastes and mine don't necessarily coincide. Many wines that you really like, you know, that I wasn't crazy about, and wines that you've sort of dinged, I happen to like a lot. So the idea is to maybe find someone who you know, sort of has a similar, you know, a tasting profile as you do, okay, and then read their articles, read their books, okay.
Well, we are at the top of the hour, and I want to kind of end officially at the top of the hour. If everybody would take their glass, and I want to say cheers to our friends at the University of Houston and all of our alums for joining us today. So we're going to say, we won't say it because you're all on mute, but on three, we'll cheers, and thank you, Kevin, for your time. So 1, 2, 3, cheers to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Enjoy your evening. If you have to go, feel free. If you'd like to stay for a few more minutes and ask, you're welcome to. So we'll end our official time at straight up 8 o'clock, and we appreciate many of you going. Thank you so much for being here. Kevin, we will be uploading this webinar, so you can watch it. We will record it. And we'll also, if the chat doesn't completely record, we will take those book recommendations and we'll put them underneath of the chat. But I believe the chat usually records as well. So we had a couple interesting questions, Kevin, I'll fire at you. So one question from Bridget was, what about storing Lambrusco?
You know, interesting.
An answer for that one?
Yes, you mentioned Lambrusco, a wine from Italy. Now, I'm in my 60s, you know, from my generation, Lambrusco was a beginner wine, wasn't very good, okay? And then I had the pleasure of visiting Italy about 10 years ago. And I got to go into the region where they make Lambrusco, and I had some beautiful, beautiful Lambrusco wines. In terms of storing wine, and this is any wine, Lambrusco, Chateau Lafite Rothschild, Manischewitz, okay? I had to throw that out there, right? You know, ideal storage unit, okay? And you can buy them these days. You can have, you know, like 6 bottle units to, you know, I happen to have a wine unit, and I'm fortunate it holds about 250 bottles. I know, you know, friends who have wine, you know, room for thousands of wines. A unit, you want it temperature and humidity controlled. Ideally, you want storage temperature right around mid-50s. You will see most of these units that you purchase, the default temperature is around 57 degrees. You want to keep humidity. You don't want too low humidity because then the cork can dry out. It can create these microscopic cracks, allowing oxygen to invade. But you don't want it too humid either, which can, you know, form mold, you know, on the labels, possibly the cork as well. So generally speaking, you want the humidity around 60 to 80%. So okay. That's ideal storage temperature for any wines. And as long as I'm talking storage temperature, let me also talk about serving temperature, because I think that's very important. It's one of my peeves. White wines, you know, you don't want it refrigerator temperature, which oftentimes is, you know, 34, 35 degrees. That's too cold. You want it a little bit warmer. White wines, generally speaking, you serve in the probably 40, 45 degree range. Red wines, you're serving in, you know, in the 60s, 65. Pinots, maybe low 60s. Some of the warmer climate grapes like Syrahs and even Cab Sauvignon, maybe 65, 67 degrees. One of my peeves when you go to a restaurant, most restaurants, you know, if they're not storing their wine properly, you want just a glass of wine, and they're giving it to you at, you know, room temperature. When we talk about drinking red wines at room temperature, we're not talking about Houston's summertime room temperature. Again, we're talking about more European room temperature, if you will, which again, mid-60s is the ideal temperature to drink red wines. Mid-40s, the ideal temperature to drink white wines.
Okay, so a couple more questions. Two, I'm going to package two together because I think one will be fairly easy for you. What should you look for in sparkling wines? Like what is your favorite? And then what I would ask you after that is, because sparkling is going to takes my brain to France. When the world opens back up and I gave you one trip to take to try wine, where will it be?
All right. First question. What do I think about sparkling wines?
What would you look for? What do you look for in a sparkling wine? What should you look for in a sparkling wine? Does it really matter?
Do I like how it tastes? I mean, truly, you may laugh, it may sound simple, but bottom line, do you like how it tastes? One of the things that there's, let's say between California and France, two distinct styles of sparkling wines. California, you're going to have more fruit forward, if you will. The French sparkling wines tend to be more sort of toasty and yeasty. You still get some fruit, but a little less on the fruit. Personally, and generally speaking, I started out with French wines back when I was first in college, you know, getting into wines in my early 20s in Austin, and I was heavily into the French wines. This was back in the 70s when really there weren't, California wines weren't as abundant as they are today. They even though there were still some good ones, they weren't as good as they are today. And the French wines were abundant and they were inexpensive. Over the years, I've magnated. I prefer the New World wines. I like the fruit. I really like the fruit. Some of these French wines I taste, and again, not to knock them, but sometimes it's, you know, where's the fruit? Okay, I miss that. But in terms of sparkling wines, I personally like the French wines. I really like those sort of bready, yeasty, toasty, you know, sparkling wines.
And
to
my other question about where would you be, maybe combine the answer here. If I gave you one shot to go somewhere to try wine when the world opens up, where would it be? And second off, remind us that Napa is a recent phenomenon, right? Napa is only a 30 or 40 year phenomenon.
Well, the California wines in general, we didn't really enter the international stage, if you will, until the mid to late 70s. In 1976, there were two California wines that beat out all the French wines. Stag's Leap, Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. It was their 73 cab that beat out all of the great French Bordeaux's. Also, I forget the vintage, but that same year, same tasting, Chateau Montelena, their Chardonnay beat out all of the great, you know, white Burgundies in France. And that helped, in my opinion, that helped launch California on the international stage. And right now, California, in my opinion, you know, we not only can compare with any of the great wine regions of the world, I think we exceed many of them. I think that California is making just some of the best wines in the world.
And what about Texas, Kevin? What about Texas?
You know, Texas, we make some very good wines in Texas. We also make some not so good wines in Texas. However, you could say the same thing about California. You can say the same thing about France, about any wine region, okay? We've had a lot of challenges in Texas over the years, physical challenges with insects, with spring frosts, excuse me, with hail during you know bad times of the year, and it's really hurt our harvest and hurt our industry greatly. But we make some really dynamite wines in Texas. I think some of the best grapes in Texas are coming from the Lubbock area near Texas High Plains, one of our wine regions, and also out in the Texas Hill Country.
Do you have a brand of Texas that you would refer to?
There are many. I would look for some of the more subtle varieties. I really like, and these are not expensive. This might be good for the audience here. Give me a second. I met him. It'll come to me. It's mixed. I'll get to it. I'll let you know. Okay.
Okay. All right.
I do like Becker. Some of Becker. I do like some of Llano Estacado. Makes some really. Their Viviano is outstanding. You want to talk about a great wine? Llano Estacado. They have a wine called Viviano. It's a red blend. Absolutely delicious. Okay. McPherson. Okay. Thank you. I had to relax for a second. Kim McPherson. Actually, his father, Doc McPherson, was a doctor in at Texas Tech. And he is credited with the resurgence of the modern day Texas wine industry, also coming about in the mid-70s. His son, Kim McPherson, makes some dynamite wines and growing the grape varietals, I think, that do very well in Texas. Grape varietals that are not maybe as popular, but grapes like Sangiovese and Syrah, as an example, okay, that he just does very, very well with. So those are just some of my favorite.
And we have a question from Anna, who's got a couple questions. They're really good. One is your top 10 wine list. It'll take too long for you to give us, but maybe you'll give it to me and we'll post it on our website. How about that? Maybe you'll give me your top 10. You can take your time. You don't have to do it right now. I think it'll take too long.
Okay.
So we'll post that on our website, Anna. But her second question is, you and I have talked about this. Why aren't all wines screw tops? And will they eventually be, because cork is difficult?
Great question. Yeah, why aren't all wines screw tops? Well, we don't want all wines in screw tops, okay? We want the 95% that I talked about earlier, those should be in screw tops. There's no reason for it not to be, okay? But those wines that are made to age, we want cork, okay? Cork is porous, and over the years, it allows a minute, microscopic amount of oxygen into the wine, which helps it mature and will help it get better. So that 5%, I still think we want corks. But for the other 95%, yeah, why aren't they all screw caps? And I think one of the, main reasons why they're not, it is very expensive. You think about a bottling line for a winery to bottle all their wines, to switch from the cork to a screw cap is very capital intensive. And I think we are getting there. If I may be wrong on this, but I think I read something where all New Zealand wines are now in screw tops. Okay, I may be wrong on that, but if not all, then the vast majority of wines from New Zealand are in screw tops. Why? Because the wines they're making are not made to age 15, 20 plus years. They're made to be consumed young and should be in screw tops, and they are.
Okay, and last question, I got it texted to me because I guess I won't call this person out that couldn't figure out the chat, but let's just say, the last two questions are, do you have a favorite under $20 bottle of wine? And what's the most surprising good wine region in the United States besides Napa that you would, Oregon or, one of those? Those are our last two questions and then we'll wrap.
Okay. In terms of wine regions, you mentioned Oregon. I mentioned earlier that Pinot Noir is one of my favorite. It is frankly my favorite red grape. Oregon, Willamette Valley, and then inside the Willamette Valley, there are many different ones called sub-appellations, sub-regions. They are making some just outstanding Pinots. In that same Pinot kick, Santa Barbara County. It's one of the reasons I picked this Bella Glace. Santa Barbara County, specifically Santa Rita Hills, inside Santa Barbara County. It's one of my favorite regions, for Pinot Noir. Now, I think you also have to, it's hard to answer that question as a whole because what are you talking? You have to talk about the specific grape because, certain wine regions, their climate is made for certain types of grapes. So that is going to vary depending on the grape variety.
Well, Kevin, I know that, we were well into the 70s of people who participated here today. Your knowledge is such a blessing to the University of Houston and your time to step up and do this today. I know apparently you have some former students on here too. I can see them smiling when you say certain things. I can see their faces when you trigger some of these kind of things. Oh, Gary snuck in a quick question. Do you recommend an aerator? We actually have 2 minutes left. Do you recommend an aerator?
Yes. Yes, for especially for reds. You can do it for whites as well, but I've got one, that I use pretty regularly. I believe in oxygenating wine. Decanting is ideal, but many times I don't want to go through the whole hassle of getting the decanter and having to clean it afterwards. So I put it through my Venturi, and it really does help. I'm a strong believer in aerating wine.
Well, you are certainly a gift and a blessing to the University of Houston. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you. I raise my glass to you again. So thank you so much for the discussion. Those of you who don't know much about Kevin, drop by the Hilton College today. And if you're anybody in that college, we'll stop and have a conversation with you in the hallway. It's that gentleman right there. And I want to thank all of you for participating today. Again, you can find this webinar will be recorded and it'll be downloaded on our website. We have 2 more coming up in the coming weeks, May 26th and June 10th. Also, if you have some suggestions on what would be other good topics for webinars, we may revisit this. Someone mentioned we should have a whiskey tasting, and as I was joking with somebody who texted me, I can't say that COVID has done much for me, but I didn't have any of this before I was quarantined. So now I have all of this. So you know, we're all in this space where content is king. So thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you all for participating. I would especially want to thank Kendra and Kirsten and Carolyn on our team for putting this together. It takes a lot of effort to pull this off. We need to get the little Gallagher guy some grape juice. I know that. He's been jonesing for some grape juice over there. Okay, perfect. Thank you all so much for being here today. Cheers, and go Cougs. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you all, and everybody, please stay safe.
Mike and Kevin, thank you so much for doing this. It's fun to actually re-engage as an alumni, right? It's an awesome thing just to see all of us here. So appreciate it.
Well, listen, it's been my pleasure, and I'm truly honored again to have been asked to do this, and the one kicking off the webinar series. Again, it is my honor.
That's a lot more pressure than you think.